There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello BookTube, I'm Sean the Book Maniac. Welcome back to my channel. Here I am with an original tag. Not my original tag, but somebody else's original tag. This is a tag based on a video that Eric Carl Anderson put out the other day, which he called Good Books with Bad Endings. And I thought when I was watching it that I loved that video so much, and as I was watching it I was exclaiming to myself, this should be a tag. I want to hear everybody's opinion on good books with bad endings. So I contacted Eric, and lovely guy that he is, he said, go ahead, turn it into a tag. So it's his tag. It's an original tag by Eric Carl Anderson. All I did was put the word tag on the end of the title, ask for his permission. So when you do the tag, don't say it's a tag by Sean the Book Maniac. It's not. It's an original tag by Eric Carl Anderson, who just didn't take those last couple steps into making it a tag. So I have done those last couple steps, and here I am to talk about good books with bad endings. So this is the good books with bad endings tag. So Eric, please go watch his video. It's a fabulous video, and he makes clear at the beginning that he's not talking about books where the ending on the level of plot, on that basic sort of simple plot outline, is unsatisfying. Although I think a case could be made, the more you go into it, that there might be a deeper reason why you didn't like how the plot ended. But he gave examples like, you thought they should have gotten married at the end, or you thought they shouldn't have gotten married at the end, or the ending was too sad for you. I mean, very basic stuff like that. We're not talking about that. But what Eric and I want to hear about, and what I want to talk about, is books where the ending was bizarre, it didn't make any sense, it didn't cohere with the rest of the book, it was structurally out to lunch, or didn't wrap up the book in any satisfying way. So I realized there's a fine line where really all of this is subjective, that you could make a more convincing case that the boy should have got the girl in the end, talking about some of those issues. So fine, just, please do with this what you will. There are no prompts, it's just a discussion tag. It's the kind of tags that people who did Raws of Scallydandling about the books tag said they wanted, and this is perfect for that. So let's get going. The challenge that we all have in doing this tag is that we don't want to do spoilers. So I'm not going to do spoilers. I'm not going to talk about the ending in a spoilery way. And you should try to do that too. If you can't delve into why you hated the ending of a particular book so much without spoiling it, just tell people before you spoil it so they have the option of fast forwarding. But otherwise, try not to spoil it. I have grouped mine into certain topics about what kind of a bad ending it was. You don't have to follow that. You can group yours or not group them as you see fit. But the first type of bad ending, and I've only got one example of this, is WTAF, or should I say, a la Daniel of Guilty Feet, the effed up ending. And this was a novel from Colombia, The Children by Carolina Sanín, translated from the Spanish by Nick Caistor. I read this a couple years ago, and this is about a young single woman in Colombia, Laura, and she's walking down the street. I think she just steps out of her apartment, and a homeless person or a beggar hands her a boy, a 6-year-old boy, and so she takes him in, and the story goes from there. That kind of a story can be so sentimental. It wasn't sentimental. I was just sucked into this odd dynamic between this odd main character and this little boy. And it was an absolutely delightful story. I was so hooked on it. And the penultimate chapter ruined the book for me. I'm going to tell you why, and I don't think that's a spoiler. There are various things that happen, and Laura goes through all kinds of personal reflections and whatever about what should she do about this kid that she's getting quite attached to, and it's just really fantastic. And then the penultimate chapter, she goes and gets an astrology reading. And the entire chapter, I think it was like 10 or more pages, might have been 20 pages, is a verbatim transcript of what her astrologist told her. And then, if memory serves, the final chapter is really short and doesn't really wrap anything up. And it's like, what? What? A fucking astrology reading to kind of close out this up to that point fantastic novel. I was irate. So that was a WTAF ending for me. The next type of bad ending that I want to talk about is like a really strange plot twist at the end. And something else that I want to say more generally about ending is endings are the part of the books that I forget the fastest and that I am most likely to forget. And also, endings are the least important part of books. So some of these are more egregious than others. For example, there is a rather shocking plot twist at the end of this Welsh novella, One Moonlit Night by Caradog Prichard, translated from the Welsh by Niall Griffiths. And while I may have missed something throughout the story up to that point that had foreshadowed it, I thought it was such a jarring plot twist that I didn't like it. I still liked the novel in a 4-star way, so it didn't bother me too much, and because I'm still kind of asking myself, was there something I missed? Because everybody else thinks this is just the cat's meow, the bee's knees. But I thought it was too radical of a plot twist at the very end. Eric already talked about this. I'm just going to briefly mention Some Hell, the gay novel by Patrick Nathan, that has a really strange ending. Everybody and their dog thinks it was a strange ending. I did this as a buddy read with Chris of Bookish Cauldron eons ago, and I thought it was a strange ending. Chris thought it was one of the worst endings. It totally ruined the book for him. It didn't ruin the book for me. The story could have ended with the penultimate chapter, and it would have been a much better novel. And I'm choosing to remember the penultimate chapter and kind of push the final chapter out of my memory. So many people felt this way, and even Patrick Nathan has talked about it publicly, that when he was workshopping the novel, he got a lot of pushback on it from his writing students, his classmates, and his teacher just said, if you feel this strongly that this is the ending that you want to this novel, you should keep it. But I think it was a bit of a mistake. The next one I want to talk about is the novel Breath by Tim Winton. And I also have to say that I don't remember how it ends. I just remember that I found it, compared to how wonderful the novel had been up until the ending, quite unsatisfying, but I have no memory of it, so I can't spoil it for you because I just remember that I didn't like it. And I remember a lot of book buddies on various bookish social media told me at the time, I read it about 4 years ago, Tim Winton, he never knows how to finish a novel, so you just have to accept it and carry on. Now, more recently I read his Cloud Street, and I don't remember the ending of that so well, but I don't remember, I wasn't unsatisfied by it, but Breath I was. So this again it was a bad ending. I still gave it 4 stars, so take it for what it is. And A Bel Canto by Ann Patchett. This was before I hated Ann Patchett, but this book made me start to kind of hate her. I read it again 4 or 5 years ago, and the ending, it got to a certain point. It was a hostage-taking thing in South America, and I thought it was really good. Now, a lot of people are mortified that I enjoyed anything about it. Maybe I would have a different opinion of the entire novel now, but at the time I thought it was really sailing along and quite a gripping story. And then she tacks on an epilogue, which is, I think, a couple of years later, that just, she undid virtually all of the power of the story, and she configured the characters in a new arrangement that was so contorted and outrageous. I was outraged. It's one of those times where I think I was reading an e-copy, because otherwise I would have thrown the book across the room. It went from a 5-star read down to a 2 or 3-star read because of that horrible, horrific crime against literature epilogue. But I wonder if I would like the whole novel. I more recently read her awful novel about a big house in New York. I don't know what that was, but it was terrible from beginning to end. And I have one example of what I thought was an overly indulgent ending, and that is The Heart is a Muscle the Size of Your Fist. I don't think I've got the title exactly. I'll put up the GIF, by Sunil Yapa. And it's set during the WTO demonstrations in Seattle in the 1990s. And there was a lot of strengths to that novel, but I saw early on that it was possibly going to go in an overly sentimental, kind of Pollyannish direction to wrap things up, and it very much did. So while there were hints of it, I thought that he indulged it to such an extreme degree that it was sickly sweet, and all the various more complex, nuanced things about the characters and the story got kind of pushed aside at the end for a happy ending. So yes, I didn't like how happy the ending was, but there was all kinds of reasons threaded throughout the novel where it was just a major bungling of what had gone before. So I would read more by Sunil. There was a lot of reviews that were similar to mine. I hope he isn't so mortified that he won't try again, because I did see a lot of literary talent in that novel, but it was too hokey and was not supported by the story up to that point. The next type of bad ending that I want to talk about is a weak ending. And I am not talking about open-ended. I like an open-ended conclusion to a work of fiction in many cases. So I'm not talking about open-endedness. But, and this is a little bit similar to what I was just saying about the Yappa novel, where there's a lot of things activated and in progress through the story that the ending doesn't address. And so it's weak. It's just weak. The first one is this mid-20th century British novel by Norman Collins, London Belongs to Me, which is a really incredible novel until the ending. The ending didn't ruin it for me, but this is about all the people living in an apartment building in 1938 in London, and leading right up until the beginning of the war. Incredible characters, a lot of humor, a lot of stuff going on. It's a big chunky novel, and I don't know whether Norman Collins didn't have sufficient distance from the war, but I felt like it ended at such a historic time, and none of that kind of helped shape the ending. So the ending felt just woefully underdone and weak. I still gave it 4 stars because up until that point it had been a 5-star read, but yeah, weak ending. And here's another example of, I remember I didn't like the ending. I remember I thought it was weak, but I don't remember why, and I don't remember very much about this story. It's Murakami Haruki's story, The Strange Library, individually published, but I just remember that the ending was really weak. The illustrations were fabulous. Okay, from here on in, there's going to be some weird things happen, and so I should just very quickly explain. My second iPad, which I use for all my notes and stuff, the battery's gone dead, so I think that old iPad is pretty much useless now. So I'm going to have to type some information in or put some information in because I can't keep it in my head. I've been turning the video on and off to keep stuff in my head. So the next one is a jarring shift in tone, where the tone of the ending was so different from what had gone before, and I was unsatisfied by that shift. So I have 2 to talk about. One is a Norwegian novel that I just read late last year, Something Long Live the Something Horn by Vigdis Hjorth, translated, I believe, by Charlotte Barsland. And it's a strange story. It's a story about a couple consultants who are helping the postal union fight against some EU directive which is going to privatize certain aspects of the post office. And so it sounds really dry and bureaucratic, but quirky characters, and there is a sense of alienation in the main character, the woman, where I was really drawn to her. She was kind of unfocused and just all over the place. So no spoilers here, but at a certain point, 3/4 of the way through the novel, there is a confrontation with all of that sense of purposelessness. And if it had stopped 3/4 of the way through, to me it would have been a great novel. But it carried on and got too sentimental, using kind of a fairy tale ending. I don't mean boy meets girl in the end. I mean that there is a further development about how this character discovers meaning through her attempt to stop the EU directive, where she hears a story about a bunch of postal workers that, like I say, at the 3/4 mark was really meaningful and had an emotional impact on me. But then when there was a second story that went on and sounded like a fairy tale, It was too much for me, and it was too jarring of a shift of this tone that had carried her. Yes, she was purposeless and kind of flying by the seat of her pants, and she was a hot mess. And then she got slammed up against something that was meaningful. And if it just stopped there with a bit of a denouement, great, but then it went off into like kind of, I don't know, Oprah-esque territory. I didn't like the ending. Jarring, shift in tone. The other one like that is The Pisces by Melissa Broder. And I did it on audio, and the audio was narrated by Broder, so I can't blame it on the audiobook led me astray, because it was narrated by the author, and that kind of a similar problem with the shift in tone. It was skanky and brash, the main character. It's about a single, kind of effed up young woman with all kinds of addiction and personality disorders that ends up falling in love with a merman. And yes, I struggle with those kind of magical realist things, but I didn't in this case. What I struggled with was that at a certain point, the tone, the jaundiced eye, the deliciously sarcastic, brazen aspects of the protagonist melted away, and we were expected to suddenly get emotionally invested in her love for the merman. I'm very sensitive to tone of voice, sometimes to a fault, but I think here it served me well because Melissa Broder read the ending of the novel and the tone of her voice shifted. So she was leading me to have this interpretation. It wasn't just, the audio narrator misinterpreted it. It was the author reading it to me with a lot of emotional oomph in her voice about the romance, and I just was turned off completely. It's like, no, you've ruined what was a great story. And again, if it had been a little bit understated, it might have worked for me, but it was over the top sentimental. And that came through not only in the words, but how the author read the words to me through the audiobook, and I was very unsatisfied. That's it. That's all there is to this tag. Talk about books that you thought were otherwise good that had bad endings. I'm tagging half of BookTube, but I can't list them all from memory, so I'm going to put something in as a supplement at the end. I am really looking forward to hearing what the rest of you have to say about this topic. Thanks, Eric, for letting me turn your great video into a great tag. Thanks for watching.